was being different something that came really organically to you, or was that like part of your MO, I want to stand out? Or was that just kind of how it happened when you were synthesizing all these different influences you had?
Yeah, kind of both. I mean, I had this instinct, since being a kid, just to always want to be different.
Yeah.
Just with the way I dressed, certainly with the music. When I saw some people doing this, I wanted to do that. As I got really hooked into folk music, Bob Dylan and the Beatles, and like folk rock, like the Byrds and Neil Young and stuff like that. Donovan when I was in high school, and then I started playing a harmonica, and so I was doing this really like Dylan influence writing, and no one in 1986 in my high school knew who really knew who Dylan was. So I felt like I was the only person in the world that knew who Bob Dylan was, man, like literally. And then I would go to the open mic nights and oh, okay, other people heard about Bob Dylan. Oh, I got a shift now. Then I shifted into the blues. It was really heavy and found this record by John Hammond, Country Blues, and, that was, like because he did renditions of everyone else's songs. So it would kind of follow that record back like a roadmap. Really got delved into Delta blues, Robert Johnson, Mississippi John Hurt, Mississippi Fred McDowell, Big Bill Broonzy, Lightning Hopkins, all these guys, and, and then the hip hop thing just kinda happened as I was a street musician, and then once I found and I just started rapping Eric B. and Rakim over this blues riff I was playing, and then it was like I knew at that moment, I was like, "I'm the only kid, playing a dobro right now rapping." And,
That's sick.
I knew that I found something, and then that was it, and then I started writing kinda raps. When I started writing raps, I love lyrics. So, it gave me more lyrics to put into a song. I really found started finding my voice then as a writer, and, yeah, and then met the band and, Jeff Clemens and Jim Prescott were just the perfect guys because Jeff knew all the music, all the hip hop I was listening to, like Tribe Called Quest, Gangstar, anybody, he would be like, "Oh, that's a Cool and the Gang sample," or "That's a Meters sample." And I'm like, "Who's the Meters?" So then he would play me the Meters.
Okay, sick.
So it was cool dynamic we had. And then the last thing I'll say was that it was different when it came out because one thing was that hip hop was all on loops, right? And we were doing basically we were a garage rock and roll band
Mhm.
that was doing hip hop. And so one thing was that, our thing was all live and we really hung our hat on that and made it a point. And we also, because of the fact that like the records that we were inspired by, whether it was Bob Dylan or John Lee Hooker, these records were all like live performance records. So when we want to make a record, like it was like, we don't want to overdub the vocals. Wait, why? Like, no, we're going for a take that has the vocal performance and the full band performance. And that's what that first two records just performances. So you can hear a lot of mistakes on that shit, and but you captured the magic, and it's a harder way to record because everybody has to nail it, so that doesn't I mean, it happens probably a lot more in your world because that's what you guys have to do, right? I mean,
Well, I know what you're saying, and I think there's like a great lesson in there because you got to remember, a lot of musicians and a lot of people listening to this podcast have come up in the era of digital recording when you can basically
okay,
fix anything,
right,
versus doing live takes, which is really where the money's at, but your brain sort of gets tricked into this world of endless possibilities with overdubbing. And that in turn kind of, I think, will influence sort of what you think is possible. And you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm in the studio now. I'm going to do my best thing, or maybe something I've never done before, versus like when I'm producing, especially working with young bands, I'm always saying that, this is not about doing something new, something different. This is about doing your thing you do the most, that your thing that you're most connected to, you know? And
Right.
that's where the live takes come in because when it's live and it's off the cuff. And yeah, there's always like little things that you might want to tweak or fix, but yeah, when we're recording, it's like the majority of that track and the band rhythm feel, and elements too, vocals, solos, all those things. You can't beat the energy of a live take.
Right, right, right. If you can catch that magic, I mean, but the thing is that it just now that, and not now, since, since the late 90s when, yeah, that's what I'm saying, because the very first two records of ours were completely analog, two tape, you know, which is its own beast, right? Because you have, just for anybody that doesn't know, like you're recording on 2-inch tapes. If you don't know what that was, you might not know what a cassette tape is, which is really thin tape, which is like, 2 millimeters or whatever, or a centimeter. And that carries X amount of information. A 2-inch tape carries a lot more information. And it's a huge roll of tape and it lasts for 15 minutes, right? You can record, 3 or 4 takes of a song and then you have to change the reel. So recording analog was so cool. And if I listen back to especially my second record, I'm like, how the fuck did they let this shit go out of the door? Like, there's some shit on there that is just not, there's good mistakes and bad mistakes. And there's some stuff I'm like, how come they didn't like punch me in on that stuff? Like, why didn't they say, fix the guitar at the end of this song? It's completely fucked up. Like,
Well, but I think
I'm like,
that's part of what's cool about it.
oh, man.
The realness of it shines through, and it's one of those intangible qualities in music that when people are listening to it, I don't think they're thinking to themselves like, "Oh, I'm digging this because it's live or whatever." It's just that it has that connection factor
Yeah,
when it's real, when it's your thing. And honestly, yeah, it's like you say, there are good mistakes and there are bad mistakes. But when someone is believing in what they're doing and making their statement, a mistake doesn't necessarily knock that off the rails. It even might make that statement sound more human. You hear them working it out as they go. But then
right,
ultimately, I think, and especially if you're in a band, like if you're a solo artist and you go into the studio and you hire a bunch of musicians, great musicians to come in and back you up, the approach might be a little different than like if you're in a band and you've really put in the time playing with these people. Well, there's an intangible magic, and it's not
right.
totally obvious just because you play that music all the time, and this thing that you might take for granted is actually the thing I think that connects with a lot of people.